Hello world! Hackers have taken over live TV in Iran, Tile wants to fine their users $1 million, and stealing cars with USB cables is set to become a thing of the past. That's all coming up in today's roundup of cybersecurity tech news. Last week, Iran's president was giving a speech on Iran's Revolution Day. Crowds gathered to watch, and of course it was streamed live on TV. However, what people watching from home didn't expect was that their TVs were about to be taken over by hackers. After commandeering the airwaves, hacktivists wearing what looks like some flavour of anonymous mask encouraged people to rise up against the Iranian government and withdraw all their money from their bank accounts in an effort to crash the country's currency. The hackers' video played uninterrupted for a whole 60 seconds, and they signed off with their slogan, "Death to the Islamic Republic," before the stream returned to footage of the president's speech. The reason for this hack is quite straightforward. There's little chance you'll have escaped news of all the protests going on in Iran. What was sparked by the suspicious death of a protester is now an existential problem for the Iranian regime. The group behind this TV hack calls themselves Edilat Ali. These guys have a huge following on Twitter, which they've built on the back of their previous hacks. Their speciality is hacking TV streams. They first hacked Iranian state TV in February of last year, and then again later that year in October. Given just how often they manage to pull off these takeovers, it would be quite interesting to know how they're doing it. However, we don't know. There just isn't any public information on it. Something to point out though is that these hacks don't seem to be of equal proportions. For example, their TV hack last October lasted just a few seconds before it was cut off, returning to a pretty flustered presenter. So in that case, it's reasonable to assume that the broadcaster themselves suffered some kind of an intrusion, and that all channels playing the stream were affected. However, in this latest hack, the hacker's video played uninterrupted for a whole minute, and there were a lot less people talking about it on social media. So at a guess, I'd say in this case, it was just a case of one channel that was streaming the event being hacked, rather than it being a more widespread event. But Edilat Ali isn't just known for their television takeovers. A couple years back, they hacked into an Iranian prison, exposing the abuse of its prisoners. And you can actually see the very moment that prison employees realised they'd been hacked. Footage from a prison control room shows an employee doing the boring job of keeping tabs on the prison's CCTV systems, when gradually, one by one, each display is taken over by Edilat Ali hackers. The company behind Tile has come up with an interesting new solution for the security nightmare that is creeps using their products for stalking, and a lot of people aren't very happy about it. The problem surrounding Bluetooth trackers like Tiles and AirTags being used by stalkers is pretty well documented. It's something that Apple preempted before releasing their AirTag, baking in features that would alert you if an AirTag that didn't belong to you was following you around. But barely a month after the AirTag's release in 2021, Apple committed to improving these anti-stalker safeguards, decreasing the time before an iPhone would alert you that an AirTag is potentially being used to stalk you, and even releasing an Android app that allows non-iPhone users to scan for nefariously placed AirTags. And whilst all this has gone some way to suppress AirTag-enabled stalking, it hasn't killed the problem, and two women recently launched a lawsuit against Apple because of it. On the other hand, all these anti-stalker features do a pretty good job of reducing the usefulness of an AirTag in tracking stolen items. And this is where Tile has identified a gap in the market, announcing their controversial new anti-theft mode. With anti-theft mode, it's impossible for a third party to locate your Tile. It won't give anyone notifications, and it won't work with Tile's feature that allows you to scan for devices that are potentially tracking you. Perfect for when a Tile is stolen, but also perfect for stalkers. However, there's a catch. Well, actually, there's a few of them. In order to enable anti-theft mode on your Tile, you have to upload government-issued ID to Tile's app, and agree that if your Tile devices are suspected of being used with criminal intent, you accept that your information may be shared with law enforcement. And, by the way, suspected means without a court order. Tile's CEO made clear in a Medium post that they'll provide your information to law enforcement even without a subpoena. And you also have to agree to pay $1 million in damages if you're convicted in a court of law of using your child devices to illegally track any individual without their consent. Okay, so now we're getting into marketing stunt territory. You see, penalty clauses like this often just aren't enforceable in contracts when the intent is to punish the individual for breach of contract, which it seems to be in this case, rather than compensate TAL for a fair amount of damages. And keep in mind, I'm most definitely not a lawyer. However, even the TAL CEO admitted that this is a grey area. If this fine is completely unenforceable and purely a marketing stunt, well, it seems to be doing a pretty good job. So let me know down below, would you use this new feature? Though something tells me, regardless of whether the fine is enforceable, TAL's new identity verification and willingness to hand over your data to law enforcement without the need for a court order is probably going to be the deal breaker here. Stealing cars using a USB cable is set to become a thing of the past after patches for affected models have just been released. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me introduce you to the Kia Challenge. It swept over TikTok last year, encouraging people to break into certain Kia and Hyundai models and then steal them with the help of a USB cable. Any flavour of cable will do, as long as it has a USB-A male connector on one end. The idea is, after smashing a car's window, you rip the plastic cover off the steering column. And this is where I'm going to be intentionally vague so as to avoid the wrath of YouTube's moderation team. So after ripping apart the steering column, you pop off the bits that the key goes into, also known as the ignition cylinder. Doing this exposes this little knob, and this is where that USB cable comes in handy, because it just so happens to be the right size and shape to fit right into that knob, which allows you to turn it, starting the car as if you had used the key. And if you're an owner of one of the over 8 million cars affected, it's not professional thieves you have to worry about, but rather TikTok-addicted kids who will steal, joyride, and then probably abandon your car all busted up in some ditch. And this is more of a problem than you might think. If we take the city of Buffalo as an example, thefts of Kia vehicles increased 500% from 2020 to 2022. And in one case, 4 teenagers were actually killed when they crashed a car they'd stolen. The problem has become so bad that some insurers are flat out refusing to touch affected models. And the Kia Challenge is largely an American problem, because the US is one of the few countries that doesn't by law require all new cars to have immobilizers, an immobilizer being an RFID transponder enclosed within genuine keys. Upon turning the key, the car will check that the transponder is emitting a valid security token and the car will start. Without it, the car is as good as dead. But whilst there's no law mandating that cars sold in the US must have these immobilizers, the vast majority of car manufacturers install them anyway. After all, they're a cheap and effective way to prevent a car from being hotwired or stolen by a Kia boy. Yes, that's the name given to the kids doing the challenge. This does all seem to be a straightforward case of Kia and Hyundai cutting corners on security to save money. However, Kia boys are now out of luck, because finally, after thousands of cars stolen, widespread media coverage, and a class action lawsuit, Kia and Hyundai have finally gotten around to releasing a fix in the form of a software update. Now, after locking a vehicle with the remote, an ignition kill feature is activated, which can only be deactivated by unlocking the vehicle with the remote, so any attempt to fiddle the car with a USB cable would be pointless. However, some models are just too old for the software updates to be applied, so the owners of those vehicles will get free steering wheel locks, which definitely aren't notoriously easy to overcome. This video was made possible by Linode, who are giving you a $100 60-day credit just for signing up. Linode is essentially your Swiss Army knife for cloud computing. If it runs on Linux, it'll run on Linode. One great feature of Linode is their app marketplace, which makes it super easy to spin up servers with pre-configured software. Use Linode's Kali Linux app to quickly spin up a fresh instance of Kali. The installer makes it easy to configure the basics, like VNC passwords, whether you want a desktop environment, and so on. Linode can run almost anything by providing all the tools a developer really needs at competitive prices. Use the link in the description now to claim your free $100. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.